If you're someone who refuses help even when you're drowning, who feels uncomfortable receiving support, and who'd rather struggle alone than ask for anything from anyone, this isn't a personality flaw. Growing up feeling emotionally neglected doesn't just leave scars, it rewires how you navigate the entire world. You learned early that needing people was dangerous, so you became the person who needs no one. But here's what psychology reveals. Your hyper-independence isn't strength or stubbornness. It's a survival adaptation that still protects you today, even when you're finally safe. In this video, we explore the 5 defining traits of adults who became hyper-independent because love felt unreliable in childhood. If you've ever been called cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable, or if asking for help feels physically painful, you're about to understand why. These aren't character defects. They're sophisticated psychological responses to an environment that taught you self-reliance was the only option. Let's decode what's really happening beneath your fierce independence. Most people feel grateful when someone offers assistance. You feel exposed, weak, or even trapped. Here's what's happening in your brain. When caregivers were inconsistent, unavailable, or dismissive during your developmental years, your nervous system learned that depending on others creates danger. Psychology calls this attachment-related hypervigilance. Your brain interpreted, "I need you as I'm unsafe," so it built walls around your needs entirely. This might show up as declining rides when your car breaks down, insisting you're fine when you're clearly struggling, or feeling inexplicably angry when someone tries to help you. You might even sabotage relationships right when they get close, because intimacy requires letting someone see your needs, and that feels like handing them a weapon. This isn't you being difficult or prideful. This is your nervous system protecting you from the pain of unmet needs. When love was conditional or absent, independence became your armor. The child who learned "I can only rely on myself" became the adult who feels suffocated by support, because vulnerability once meant disappointment, and your brain hasn't forgotten. You're the organizer, the problem solver, the one everyone leans on, but you lean on no one. You overgive, overwork, and overperform because being needed feels safer than needing. Here's the psychology. Children who experienced emotional neglect often develop what's called compulsive caregiving. You learn that your value came from what you provided, not who you were, so you became indispensable as a survival strategy. This might show up as always being the strong friend, managing everyone else's crises while hiding your own, or feeling anxious when you're not actively useful. You might struggle with rest because doing nothing feels like losing your purpose. Relationships feel balanced only when you're giving more than you're receiving, and equality actually makes you uncomfortable. This isn't generosity, it's a protection mechanism. If you're always the capable one, you never risk the rejection that comes from being needy. Psychology recognizes this as a counter-dependent attachment style. You've reversed the dependency equation entirely. You learned that being needed keeps people close, while needing people pushes them away. So you became the person who holds everything together, because falling apart once meant falling alone. Wanting emotional support, asking for reassurance, or admitting you're tired feels like you're being a burden. Your needs carry shame, as if simply having them makes you weak or demanding. Here's what's really happening. When your early needs for comfort, attention, or validation were ignored or criticized, your brain internalized a devastating message. Your needs are too much, unwanted, or wrong. This might show up as apologizing excessively, minimizing your pain by comparing it to others' suffering, or only expressing needs when you've reached complete breakdown. You might feel intense discomfort when conversations focus on you, or you redirect attention away from your struggles immediately. Even basic things like asking your partner for a hug might feel humiliating. This isn't low self-esteem, it's conditioned self-erasure. Psychology identifies this as need shame, a trauma response where the nervous system learns to suppress signals for connection and care. The child who was told, "Stop being so needy," or "You're too sensitive," became the adult who hides their humanity to avoid rejection. Your needs aren't excessive, they were just received by people who couldn't meet them. Healthy relationships require mutual dependence, leaning on each other, sharing burdens, asking for support. But to you, that feels like failure. You see independence as moral superiority and neediness as character weakness. Here's the psychological truth. Children who couldn't depend on caregivers often develop what's called defensive self-reliance. You didn't choose independence. You were forced into it when dependence proved unsafe. This might show up as judging people who ask for help frequently, feeling contempt toward your own moments of vulnerability, or believing that truly strong people never need anyone. You might romanticize isolation, viewing emotional distance as wisdom rather than protection. Partnerships feel threatening because they require the exact thing your childhood taught you to avoid, relying on someone else's consistency. This isn't maturity or enlightenment. It's a trauma adaptation masquerading as strength. Psychology recognizes this as counterdependency, where independence becomes compulsive rather than chosen. The child who survived by needing nothing became the adult who can't imagine safety in connection. But here's the truth. Interdependence isn't weakness. It's the foundation of secure attachment. You're not stronger because you're alone. You're just still protecting a wound. The worst thing someone could call you is needy, clingy, or too much. You monitor yourself constantly to avoid taking up space, asking too many questions, or requiring too much attention. Here's what's encoded in your nervous system. When caregivers treated your needs as inconveniences, interruptions, or problems, you learned that your existence itself was burdensome unless you stayed small and self-sufficient. This might show up as leaving relationships before you're left, refusing help even in emergencies, or feeling panic when someone does something kind for you, because now you owe them. You might reject compliments, deflect concern, or insist you're fine even when you're falling apart, because admitting struggle feels like confirming you're too much to handle. This isn't humility, it's survival-based self-minimization. Psychology calls this hyper-autonomy, where independence becomes rigid to prevent the pain of perceived rejection. The child who felt like a burden became the adult who disappears their needs entirely. But you were never too much. You were just given too little. Your existence isn't a problem to solve. It's a reality that deserves care. If you've ever been called emotionally unavailable, too independent, or impossible to help, now you understand. You're not broken or cold. You're adapted. Your hyper-independence is evidence of how hard you worked to survive an environment where vulnerability meant risk. The truth is, you're not stronger because you need no one. You're just still protecting yourself from the pain of unmet needs. Healing doesn't mean becoming dependent. It means learning that safe interdependence exists, that your needs aren't shameful, and that asking for support doesn't make you weak. Subscribe for psychology insights that explain who you really are. And if this brought up difficult emotions, consider reaching out to support. You deserve care, even if that feels impossible to believe.